The Honourable Member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, having recently been given the privilege of serving as Assistant Minister to the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction, I thought it opportune to outline the approach I'll be bringing to this role and how excited I am to fulfil it as part of getting Australia to carbon neutrality by 2050. But I think often what happens when members get elevated to these important offices is that they obviously bring in some of their experience. And I've always taken a very long-term interest in climate change policy, Deputy Speaker. For instance, many years ago, when I was working in the space of intellectual property policy, I became particularly exercised and interested at the attempts by the Greens, amongst others, to try and undermine investment and innovation in low-carbon technology, always understanding that technology was going to be the pathway where we decouple economic growth from a dependence on fossil fuels and other carbon emissions. It took me particularly to the Copenhagen conference in 2009, where I heard firsthand from many green activist groups on how they wanted to get rid of intellectual property on low-carbon technology and the terrifying impacts that would have for getting the world to a carbon-neutral future. As a result of the discussions in this parliament related to an emissions trading scheme and carbon tax, I then went off and learned about carbon accounting at Swinburne University. And later, because I became interested in the science of climate change, went and did postgraduate studies at Murdoch University, which were partly interrupted in my time as Australia's Human Rights Commissioner, but did give me a valuable insight into the science underpinning climate change, and more recently went off to Cambridge and studied business to net zero, because it gave an insight into the challenges that businesses face and how we've got to be working with them. But when you actually go through and unpack the issues, particularly through that business net zero approach, it outlined firstly the scale of the challenge that the world faced, but secondly how what we need is a model based on cooperative leadership to work with industry, households and of course government to be able to drive change and improve the health and welfare of our communities as well as the environmental legacy. And what it backed up more than anything else, when you actually do and take the issue seriously, is to understand how critical it is that technology is going to be the solution to get a decoupling. And in comparison to the approach of the Greens, who of course look at reducing greenhouse gas emissions through deindustrialisation, or Labor, who want to do it through a Malthusian constraint on the economy through taxes, the technology-based approach takes the issue seriously, because there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but built on pillars and a cooperative approach. Finally, Deputy Speaker, nearly a decade ago now, in a book I edited, Turn Left or Right, Values in Modern Politics, I actually wrote specifically a chapter on what the Liberal solution was to cutting greenhouse gas emissions, and it was to back in technology which drove economic growth, and frankly, we cut emissions even if we didn't intend it.
The member's time is